Now, I want to stand here and brag about my BMW because it is so nice and it was so expensive and it's so fast. It can do 200 on the Autobahn and blah, 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 but no. It's had a hard year, that's for sure. And I feel like I've been falling out of love with it. I don't really know what to do, so, oh God. So I'm actually asking the internet for advice. Let's just go over the history and the whole 4-year update. So this is my first car. I bought it 4 years ago, fresh out of high school for $2,800 at 160,000 miles. It is now at 185,000 miles, and it's probably worth about $2,800 less than I paid for it at the moment. When I last left off, which was last fall, we had just finished putting this car back together after it came this close to death on the mountain road, driving home to my parents' cabin at night too fast. I may or may not have killed a deer in the process. There's still evidence that something not very good happened with this car because, well, that panel doesn't match. Don't know if you noticed. This fog light right here isn't really put in properly. These grills started to fall off, so now they're zip tied in. And I don't think the engineers in Munich wanted the turn signal to be movable like this. But that's just some of the cosmetic issues this car is dealing with right now. So we had just finished repairing the crash damage from the deer, and then a couple months ago, I just parked it at work and somebody backed into it, didn't leave a note. I know they noticed, however, because there was a piece of their taillight embedded in my spoiler. So I'm kind of hoping that because they just escaped and didn't leave a note, that their damage was worse than mine, and I'm going to assume that it was because my taillights are still there, and now it's pouring rain, of course. You can see from where you are sitting right now that the damage back there isn't horrible, but it was definitely noticeable. That trunk lid, not only does it look ugly, but now the button on it won't work, so I have to open it with the key, which isn't a big deal, but it was something that I definitely noticed. And there is a little bit of structure damage underneath, but it might be fixable. Who knows though? That looks like a pretty difficult spot to pull a dent out of. That wasn't a nice thing to happen to this car. I definitely didn't deserve that. And unfortunately, the rain isn't really helping in this situation, but the car is oxidizing on many different areas. And that scares me because if any of you know my history with rust, it's not a good one. So on the outside, there's rust beginning on pretty much every single panel. This crash repair job could have been a little bit better executed by me and my dad because it doesn't seem like anything is lining up super well. But we rushed it to get this car back on the road so I could use it over the winter because it is the most reliable and capable winter car that I have. And as soon as we got this thing back on the road, it was basically straight into winter work. So at the time I was living up at my parents' cabin, and for me, winter started about a month and a half before it started for everybody else. And then it ended up being a record-breaking winter here in terms of snowfall and things like that. And then in February, a certain Freelander decided to break down, once again forcing this car to be my only usable winter car. Yes, I have the Volvo, but it's front-wheel drive, and if there's a serious snowstorm, I'm not going to take my chances. After a while and driving it through the snow, the biggest issue on this car by a country mile started to make itself apparent over the winter with just this looming smell. Now, there are some automotive smells, and not all of them are bad. You can usually ignore them. Oil burning depends on how strong it is, but with this car, I've been able to ignore it most of the time. Coolant gives me PTSD with my Land Rover experience, but again, not a big deal. But the smell of cooked clutch is not a pleasant one at all. I'm not saying that oil burning is a pleasant smell. That's not what I mean. Pretty much every time I took it out in the snow, it reeked of clutch when I got back. Also, the grab point is very high and the whole pedal just feels spongy. And as a result, every single time you operate the clutch, it's very difficult and extremely frustrating to do it smoothly. When you consider the fact that you're going to be using the clutch a lot, that makes it a bit less enjoyable to drive. On the cosmetic side, the car isn't great. There's the panel out here, the rust, and that seat on the inside has been ripped and trashed the entire time I've owned the car, and it only gets worse. Also, of the 5 windows that you're supposed to be able to open and close in this car, you want to guess how many work? 2 of them. That would be the driver's side rear window, which I never need, and the sunroof. This front passenger window is getting slow. This passenger rear window has been stuck for a while, and let me just demonstrate with the fantastic BMW key thing. Hold down the unlock button. And it works perfectly because it's on video, but maybe it'll take a while to roll itself up. There's obviously something not... And the sunroof doesn't want to shut. So the sunroof thinks that something's blocking it, and there's nothing blocking it. These front 2 windows are both definitely on their way out, to the point where I don't think I can trust them for much longer. Okay, window regulators and motors, that's not a big deal to replace. And I've never really done it myself. So the fact that there are 3 that are going out or broken in this car means that it'll be good practice for me, and by the time they're all replaced, then I'll be a pro at it. Like I said, the clutch is definitely on its way out. It couldn't be anything but on its way out. Maybe it's a bearing or something that's causing the problems. But I don't know, the grab point being really high and the pedal feeling really spongy, and the fact that it smells every time I take it out, especially in the snow for some reason. Even going up hills in the snow in first gear, I don't know if it's clutch slipping, but it definitely feels like it. But I can't get the clutch to actually slip using the method that everybody does, where you put it in a high gear at low speed. I can't get it to slip there, but it always does when it's driving up a snowy hill. Don't really know. I'm not a mechanic or an engineer. That should be obviously apparent at this point in my channel, but there's definitely something wrong with the clutch. Also, it feels like everything that connects the transmission to the wheels, not just the clutch, everything feels like it's just trashed and dead and broken. When you're accelerating, there's this really loud rumble that feels like it's coming from the back passenger wheel, but I'm terrible at locating stuff like that. And on the highway, it shimmies and is pushed all around like there's some massive windstorm or an earthquake that's happening. So highway driving isn't that good. Cosmetically, this car is in the worst shape that it's ever been since it was new. And mechanically, it drives the worst that it ever has since I've had it. Here's an example of the poor health that this car has been in the past couple months. I went on a canyon drive recently with 2 of my other friends who also own BMWs. One has an E28 and one has an E39. We plan on driving our cars up the canyon, chasing each other down through the fun turns, looking out for deer, and coming back down and just having a good time. Well, I'll say that this lasted longer than the E28 did, which that lasted about 6 miles until it broke down. And this made it all the way up the canyon road and halfway down before it started misfiring very badly, running like it was on 4 or 5 cylinders. Once I'd gotten to an uphill stretch, I floored it and immediately check engine light turned on and it went into limp home mode. Well, there was 1 car out of 3 that made it trouble-free. Now I've got limp home mode, which means I have 30 horsepower at best and a check engine light. Spirits are high. I discovered that day that there is regular limp home mode, and then there's limp home mode Pro. And Pro meant that I had probably 3 horsepower going up a hill. I was in first, flooring it. Here's a clip. Come on. And this is my top. This is not good.
So
top speed.
Yeah, I'm worried about that too.
was just about to pull over and give up, and the hill leveled out. So I barely made it to my parents' house, switched the car off, turned it back on, and the car was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good now. It was completely fine. It was like that guy in an action movie that gets fatally shot, but he doesn't want his friends to be like scared for his life. So he pretends that he's fine, even though he has a gaping gunshot cannonball wound in his chest, and you know he's bleeding out and he's gonna die, but he's still like, I'll be okay, just go on without me. I'm 100% fine, I can just get up and walk it off. That's this car right now. There's obviously something not right with the way this car is driving, but it will not give me any check engine light or codes or anything. It won't just admit that it's falling apart. Yes, the check engine light was on, but after I switched the car off and turned it back on, the engine light was gone, and I haven't been able to get it to come back. When I plugged my scanner into it, it said that there was nothing wrong. And my reaction to that was, oh yeah, bullshit. But this is the car that I really can't drive right now because of the state it's in. Sure, it's drivable, but it's bad enough that you wouldn't want to drive it. Which I'm gonna do that right now. After I change, because I'm going into work and I don't want everybody to see me dressed up in M apparel and they're gonna make assumptions about the character that I am. Normally when you hop behind the wheel of a manual transmission BMW, you're thinking, oh yes, this thing is gonna be sweet. But there's our first example. That was me just honestly letting off the clutch, and I don't know if it shows up on camera. Maybe I'm just all of a sudden bad at driving a manual transmission, and hey, if that turns out to be the case and the clutch is fine, then I'll 100% concede to being bad at it because I don't have to deal with replacing the clutch. But I don't know, I used to be able to drive this car pretty smooth, so keep going. Nothing. See, it knows that I'm filming a video complaining about all the problems that it has, so it's being extra well behaved at the moment. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, which I always hate when my cars do that. Also, I think my brakes need to be done pretty soon. They feel not very good either. I'm genuinely wondering if I should fix a few things and then sell this and get something a little bit more fun. Because I have two cars that will relatively get me through winter okay. You don't always need four-wheel drive, and the Volvo has snow tires. So the Volvo on most days is fine. I just have to not take it up many steep hills or anything, and I don't often need to do that anymore like I used to. So the Volvo would be fine most of the time doing the winter work, when the Freelander is pretty much guaranteed to be broken in some way, because I think that car knows when winter is coming, so it breaks down so that it gets to spend the winter in a nice heated garage instead of out being covered in snow. Here's flooring it. 40, 50, 60. It wasn't a fast car from the factory, let's be honest. A 325i is not exactly an Autobahn missile or something to take to the Nürburgring every day, but this feels like it has 130 horsepower the way it's driving right now. And of course you would say, okay, last time this happened, it was a vacuum leak, but it will not give me any check engine light codes or anything. It only had one time where the check engine light came on, and it basically went into critical DEFCON 1 lockdown mode, where it restricted power to like 3 horsepower, and I wasn't able to actually drive it up any sort of slope. Limp home mode is supposed to get you home, but that was not get me home mode. That was get me to the side of the road where I can call it tow truck mode. I don't really trust this car as much as I used to because of what happened on that canyon road. And maybe it just doesn't want to have anything to do with canyon roads anymore because of its history on one. But here's my thought process for maybe selling this on and getting a new car. When I think of either of the two possibilities, I have one thing that lingers in my mind. I think, okay, do I only want to sell this car because of all the problems it has right now? Or do I only want to keep this car because it's my first car and I'm scared I'll regret it? Reasons why I would keep this car is that when it's working fine, it's a great all-arounder and it's got enough equipment to make you happy through winter and basically everyday driving. And it's a beast in the snow and it's a lot of fun in the snow. But the biggest reason why I would struggle to sell it on is because it's my first car that I bought with my own money. But even when I think about that, would I consider the E46 I had before my first car? Or would I consider this my first car only because it's the first car that I actually bought myself, like independently? Should I not sell it just because I know I'll regret selling my first car, because people say you always do regret selling your first car? Do I also only want to sell it because of the problems it has and I'm trying to just outrun my responsibility on it and I want to go into something easier? Or do I want to sell it because I feel like the whole daily driver thing is already covered by 2 other cars in my fleet, and there's definitely a need for something a little bit more fun, a little bit more weekendable, something that I can take to Cars and Coffee and be proud of? That's the dilemma that I'm facing right now. But I definitely feel like the past 6 months I've fallen out of love with this car. I'll be honest with you guys, this is a great car, but I don't think I've ever loved it in the way that I've loved other cars that I've had. As in, I loved my E36, and despite everything it's put me through, I also love my Freelander. I've never felt super proud of this car in any way. I have times where I'll be driving this car and I feel connected to it and really enjoying the driving experience and all that stuff. But I'll have times where I just think, you know, I don't think I've ever really loved this car in a way. There's that clutch again. I don't know if you guys can hear the rumble, but there's definitely a rumble. It's hard to replicate. I might be able to do it again here in a second. But when I just get this horrible feeling that, and I think to myself, you know, I don't think I've ever really loved this car that much. Maybe I just feel like I'm obligated to some sort of commitment to it only because it's my first car. But do I just move on? Well, I can't move on because all the issues it has right now. How much money would I get for it? I'll have to call my local junkyard and find out their rates. That's where this car is at the moment. So even if I sold it right now, I wouldn't get any money for it. Just nothing. So it's not even worth selling it until I fix the problems. All right, here we go. Let's hope that we can get all the delicious rumbling and clutch slipping and all that crap here. This is floored. It was there a little bit. I don't know if you could hear it, but you definitely feel it. It vibrates your seat and it's not a good feeling at all. And it's just so down on power. Like, I feel like if I have a car with a manual, it should be something that I'm using to go on canyon roads or to put a smile on my face. And this car just doesn't put a smile on my face. Maybe that's just because of the fact that it's, with all the issues it has right now, it's so frustrating to drive. It's probably what it is. But I don't know. What do you think? Like, do you think, honestly, I know you can't exactly look inside my head, but I've tried to describe it in the best way possible. Is it just me wanting to escape the responsibility of fixing this car, or do I actually want to move on and get something new? Like, should I? I don't know. But yeah, I want to thank everybody for watching this video. Once I fix it, if there's anything that I can do to try to conjure up some more love for it, and then I'll feel more inclined to keep it. I don't know, I just would appreciate some advice from people who know what they're talking about. Because I obviously don't know what I'm talking about when I do these videos, but I try to pretend the best I can. All right, everybody. Thanks, everyone, for watching. I hope everybody has a marvelous day. Bye-bye. Does this have